Well, welcome everybody. This is the very second podcast. The first one really I don't even think was a podcast because that was just kind of me telling people who I am and what I do. So this is actually really the very first podcast. And I am joined here today with Joe Vandermark, who is, I don't even know how to explain you, Joe, other than the fact that you're one of the most brightest technologists. If I ever have a question on, I don't know how to do this, or what do you think about that, or where would you go with this? You're that guy because you're just so brilliant in your many, many years of engineering. I'm going to let you toot your horn here in a minute, but I'm going to do it ahead of you here. But you have
Thank you.
just been such a blessing to work with, and you're one of the best technologists I know. So with
Appreciate that.
that, who are you, Joe?
Sure. Yeah. So I work for Microsoft, as you mentioned, and I'm the global lead for Azure architecture for a small set of our top manufacturing customers. I'm located here in the Twin Cities, Minneapolis, St. Paul. I actually live kind of far out in the middle of nowhere, but I've got 25 years of experience in IT, spending most of it at the intersection of IT and business. I've been helping retail and media companies and manufacturing customers make sense of what they have and how they need to change their thinking and approach to enable digital transformation. So I guide them to better adopt, deploy, and operate Microsoft stuff and enabling long-term business value from their investment in Microsoft. So I'm also, as you mentioned, I'm all over the place, but I'm also
Wow.
kind of an ag nerd or an agricultural nerd. So I've been building and operating several intelligent systems that kind of encompass hardware and IoT and AI to help farmers, including my own plots, to optimize returns on inputs and while preserving those scarce resources and protecting the environment. So, of course, I'm also a fan of doing the right thing the right way securely. So pretty
No, I
important.
mean that's where you and I have intersected with our passions. They kind of all kind of go in the same direction. And so when you look back on your career, and you've been I mean, so many great companies, and you've helped them make sense of technology and building very complex applications. And of all of the things that you've done in your career, what would you say is the most challenging of all of your projects that you've worked on? And let's just say this is pre Joe, pre Microsoft.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say the technology's been challenging. I think the most challenging things in my career thus far has been about transformation of people and culture and trying to understand how technology will guide and assist and enable them to do better things. It's
Yeah,
just it's
yeah.
really been kind of my passion working people towards the technology, not taking technology and shoving it towards the people. So
Well, and I think you and I both would agree it's technology not for the sake of technology, but what can technology do that adds value? And as you start talking about digital transformation, that word reminds me, or those two words remind me of e-commerce, right? Like it means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And when you look at digital transformation and how Microsoft looks at digital transformation, I mean, what does it really mean to you, and what does it mean to Microsoft? Because I think a lot of people may misunderstand what that means.
sure. Well, I mean, it's a term or a set of words that have been thrown around a lot without truly understanding the context. And for every company and every individual, it's going to be different. During this current global economic climate of uncertainty, the biggest learning is that no business is immune to this crisis, and no organization is 100% resilient. So it's taught us that digital businesses and those fortified with some digital capabilities have been able to pivot more rapidly and respond to their customer needs. So, I talk about resilience. This is kind of the ability for the customers or businesses to adapt quickly to changing conditions. And that's really been the hallmark for success in today's environment. To think about like organizations that embarked on their transformation journey, they're starting to see these benefits. And with cloud-enabled technologies, they have access to on-demand tools and capacity tailored to their needs. They don't have to buy hardware, they don't have to install it. They just set it and go. So you got scalability, speed of implementation, you're seeing increased cost savings. And with that, you have an efficient, agile, self-managed, and self-sufficient tools. And these employees are staying productive more than they ever have been.
So when you kind of think about now, if I'm a business person and I'm saying, okay, you know what, I I get all this great technology. I get the cloud, and I can see how the economies of scale that the cloud has created is a huge benefit. I see how, I can transform my organization by, enabling these technologies. Do you feel that the ROI now is really there for the company to really go all in on the cloud? Because I know there's a lot of people I still talk to that are still, they have a little bit of trepidation. They're kind of going, well, if I put all my eggs in that basket, there's a risk. What would you tell that person? I mean, what would you kind of, as they're looking at that digital transformation? Because it's a big step for a lot of companies.
Yeah, I mean, there's several aspects to it. One being is where are you putting your stuff? Where are you hosting it? Is it in your own data center, a co-location, a cloud, your garage? Who knows? And then
Right.
the other aspects are how are you enabling your organization? So I think of it like from a Microsoft perspective, we call it tech intensity. And every organization in every industry will increasingly need to embrace it in order to be successful and to grow. So really, those that are able to quickly respond as this crisis and other crises in the future impact their industries, they will have a solid foundation for recovery, and they'll be able to imagine or reimagine what the future might bring. So I think about simple things like data. Maybe it's not simple, but data is everywhere. It's sprayed all over the place. It's
Oh yeah.
generated by virtually limitless sources, and the pace of data growth is just increasing incredibly. So like if you look at IDC and you look at their estimates for 2025, they believe that the world's data will grow to 175 zettabytes. That's
Yeah.
175
That's
trillion
incredible.
gigabytes.
Yeah.
So to put it into context, like if we were talking to my kids are probably too young to understand what Blu-ray discs are, but if I talk to my oldest son, who's 25, you can take Blu-ray discs and put all that data on it. You could stack the discs to the moon and back 23 times. It's just incredible
I
amount of
know.
data. So of course, with all this data, their challenge organizations face are not just how to deal with the volume, but it's also how to find good new ways to generate new customer value, leveraging that data. And
Right.
I think that's, those that are successful in that, they're going to become the industry leaders.
No,
So,
I totally agree. And I think you also marry in some of these emerging technologies, which I think is a really good segue because I've never seen in the history of my career in technology so many amazing technologies emerging at once. I mean, you've got, IoT, you have quantum computing, you have AI. I mean, you have all these amazing things that are happening. And I think it's almost overwhelming for a lot of companies because they go, where do we spend our money? Because as these technologies are evolving, the value of them isn't as widely known yet, right? Because they are emerging, and people are afraid to spend a lot of money in a certain area until they really know what that benefit can be. And so, what are some of the emerging technologies that get you excited, and how do you see these things that you are excited about? How are they adding value to a business? Because I think it's a really big thing a lot of people are thinking about these days.
right. Yeah, I mean, it's, the joke amongst us tech enthusiastic folks are, hey, if you got blockchain and Kubernetes, that'll fix everything, right?
Yeah,
You hear
right.
all these little catchphrases and technical terms, and I don't believe that any size fits all. I think every
I agree.
individual and every company has their own thing. Microsoft works really hard to ensure that we have technology that's meeting your needs today, but also tomorrow. And with our cloud, it moves really fast. So every week, new technology comes out every day. Like I could go one day and understand something, and a week from now, it could be totally different. So that rapid pace of change uh, allows us to meet new capabilities. And then we're, investing in things, on the horizon like IoT and AI and quantum computing. For developers, it's all about being able to let them build on their own terms, with their own tools and the open source stack that they like, and ensure that they have the flexibility and freedom to be able to work successfully and be able to deploy their apps with quality and confidence every single time. Tech that's sitting in the public cloud, sitting in the data center, sitting on edges, all running in some holistic way in a seamless environment. And that seamless environment is essential. So I
Yeah.
think about our
No.
hybrid scenario here at Microsoft, that we've been in the back office forever and ever, and we just married that with what we have in the cloud. You know, You mentioned quantum computing. That's obviously a pretty big deal. We'll talk a little bit about that, I
Yeah.
assume at some point in
Yeah.
time. I'm an IoT geek, right? So the
Yeah.
concept of being able to uh, gather sensor data, instrumentation, and send it somewhere so I can make it actionable or at least inform, that's pretty essential. And the more and more devices we put in our house, the more things that you see connected to your Wi-Fi router at home, or in your business or out in the field, it just gets tremendously more difficult to secure and optimize these things. So the more and more we do to build that framework and give them the ability to optimize these things on the fly without having to do onesie twosie, I think that would be a pretty big deal for them.
Yeah. Now, and I would say also too, one thing Microsoft has done that I love, and you really touched on it from a developer perspective, is really just how you've organized and allowed the management of those assets. Like I think whoever did your design in the back end of just being able to interface with the things you need the way you would need to use them as a developer has been one of the things I just think is fabulous about what Microsoft has done for the cloud. And then, as we're kind of talking about all these emerging technologies, I think Microsoft has also done a great job of integrating those into your platform. So you have access to those things in a very easy way. So I think, for me, at least from the outside looking, and that's been one thing we've really, really loved about working with Microsoft. And now this kind of leads into an area that I know a lot of people are interested in, which is artificial intelligence. And again, AI, similar to digital transformation, is a very big word that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people too. Do you feel like it's overhyped, and is this really as exciting as we believe? Now, I will give you my opinion first, and then I want to hear yours. So,
Sure.
when I think of AI, I think of what we have now as kind of this early stage, what I would call narrow AI. It's really trying to kind of create this idea of a human intelligence to some extent, where it can look at large sets of data and find things, but you have to ask it a very specific question in order to find what you want. But it does a really good job linearly with those types of queries. Now, what I really want to see things get to is what I would call artificial general intelligence, which is really what the human can do, which is think and have creativity and abstractly do things and strategize and tap into memories or things that way. And I think we're getting there very quickly. In fact, a lot faster than I would ever would have imagined. But what do you think? Where is AI right now when we talk about Microsoft? Because I know you guys are doing so much in that area, and in fact, you are one of the leaders. So, what are you doing now?
Yeah, I mean, well, it is hyped quite a bit, but I think it's real. I mean, AI is not an old idea. I mean, the Greek
That's
myths
right.
going way back, about intelligent robots to more modern times with Turing and Asimov and autonomous vehicles and deep speed, which we just released in the public recently. I believe our advances in AI within the computer vision, speech recognition, machine reading, natural language processing are far more practical than what the media covers. It's interesting. We have all these assistants like Cortana, Siri, Alexa, Google,
Yep.
and so on, and they've accelerated the consumer adoption of AI. And I don't think people realize that the more and more that they interact with these devices, the more they'll evolve and provide to them additional value. So, when you make this stuff available to everyone, AI will transform these industries, make us more productive, and help solve some of the societal challenges that we have. And intelligent technology that we're providing through AI is already improving our lives today, and I'm
It
sure
really is.
it'll improve us in the future. I was reading recently about Intel's neuromorphic system, running
Yep.
some of their 64 chip systems that essentially look at, as an example, they have uh, what is that game where little soccer ball on the table and they're kicking it around with the little guys that spin. I can't remember what the name of the game is, but they basically could run this thing with camera systems and this neuromorphic system, and it could simulate what the humans would be doing to running that game. So it's pretty amazing. The just the amount of compute that goes behind it and
Oh,
all the
it's incredible.
intelligence, and then the fact that, more and more that we interact with this AI, the less you need to be as a technical expert. It's getting to the point where, it's NLP. You can just talk to the thing, it'll figure out what you want and provide to you feedback or give you something actionable or just automate the things like turn my lights on. Well, my lights are on now.
Right, right.
Good stuff.
Well, it's kind of interesting, as you kind of mentioned this because, a lot of people are starting to understand this correlation between AI, high performance computing, quantum computing, which we'll talk about in a minute, and then how all this kind of comes together and converges. And one thing that frightens me is, Elon Musk is really worried that, AI will lead to the extinction of the human race, which maybe or maybe not. I don't believe so, but he has his obvious reasons and thoughts for that. But the greater concern I have is at the rapid pace of adoption of these technologies, such as AI, that are now going to be, like I just heard from a friend who's working on an amazing project to leverage Microsoft AI to manage all the airplanes flying in the domestic United States and potentially even the world. And I think that's just amazing because there's absolutely no doubt in my mind that, as Isaac Asimov once said, is, I trust more computers, the world is safer with them, right? But
Right.
on the other side of it, if you can inject fake data into a database, the AI has no idea to disseminate which fake or real data, right? And
Right.
so the concern I have is, how do we protect these AI systems and ensure that fake data doesn't become a massive problem? And in fact, that's one of the things that we're working on right now at Secured2 is, how do we solve this problem? But it's going to be interesting. It'll be really interesting to see how it all plays out. And there's no doubt in my mind that Microsoft will emerge as the leader, one of the leaders, and I know Google's is racing you guys there. But I now, do you think there's going to be more cross collaboration in terms of AI and getting to the melding of, humans and machines and super intelligence? I mean, do you see the big guys kind of all coming together to solve these problems, or do you think it's still going to be siloed?
Yeah, I think there has to be some consortium of some sort at some point in time that builds controls wrapping around these things. I mean,
Exactly.
we have our guiding principles around fairness, reliability, safety, privacy, security, transparency, inclusiveness, and accountability. Those are all the guiding principles around AI for us. And it doesn't work if we don't all play by the same set of rules. So somewhere along the way, we have to come to some common understanding on how do we train these things? How do we keep them up to date? How do we make sure that they don't go astray? Elon is, his thoughts are probably going along the Terminator 2, right? We don't need
Yeah.
Skynet to
Right.
take over the world because it's become self-aware. And, I think it's not far-fetched, not at all.
Right.
So we have to be very careful about how we implement these things. And these systems are built by humans, and humans have bias. So
That's right.
naturally, as we're training these things, there's going to be some problems along the way. So we just have to build intelligent controls around these things to ensure that that they're doing everything that they're supposed to do. So
And that they're used for good. And by the
yeah,
way, I will say this, Satya, when I saw him in his last speech, he talked a lot about the democratization of AI. And I think I was so pleased to hear this from him because I think he sent a very big message to the entire industry that, hey, there is bad that can come from this technology, and we need to be aware of these things. And that's why the democratization of it becomes very important because people shouldn't, because I mean, we're reaching a point, this, Joe, that it's going to be those that control the technology and those that don't. And there will be a big difference between the livelihoods of those two people.
right.
And because I believe that the shift of global power will be those that wield these technologies and those that don't and can access them and benefit from them. So it's going to be very interesting to see where that all goes. So we're going to shift gears because, I know we're trying to keep this tight on 30 minutes, but Office 365. I just have, when I say that, when I say those two words, I just can't think of anything that you guys have done better and executed better in the history of Microsoft. I think that just how it was deployed, how it's worked, and just the massive success is just something that is utterly incredible. Where is it going to go from here? Because I mean, I will tell you right now, it's pretty awesome, and I love using it. And we've even, built some things for it. But where do you see it going in the future? Do you think that Microsoft can continue to keep this an open platform for developers, or do you think eventually Microsoft is going to have to, take more ownership over it? Where do you see it going?
Well, I mean, it's an interesting topic, not my expertise. I'm more on the Azure side, but when I think
Sure.
about Office, I think about as a consumer, I do a lot of context switching and I lose my focus a lot. So, I would assume that in the near future, we're going to advance, our cross-site search to bring relevant information to me, and building on all sorts of new upcoming circumstances and experiences to leverage those fluid frameworks that we use to build these systems. I think about ensuring that when I'm using the tools or the products, that I don't need to interrupt my process to open another tool up. So
Right. Right.
essentially, if I can use a suite and not have to context switch around and lose track of where I'm at, and have that focused experience through that entire ecosystem, that it should minimize my external distractions, lessen self interruptions, and kind of jumpstart the flow. I mean, I want to hit the ground running. I don't have to, try to figure anything out. So, John Friedman, he's the head of our office design. He's got some pretty good blog posts out there. So if the listeners here want to check that out, search for him
Yeah.
in your favorite search service and Bing, and go from
Yeah.
there.
Hey, those are good plugs there. Those are very good
Yeah,
plugs.
yeah,
But no, that's great to hear, because I know a lot of people are using it, and some people now are trying to figure out whether or not they should make the switch and move into it. And I would tell anybody that if you're in business, if you're not using Office 365, you're crazy. It's a great tool. Now, one area, and obviously it's very near and dear to my heart, because this has been one area that I do have a concern, which is around security. Now, Microsoft has, I think, done an incredible amount to try to increase the protection of its users. However, you're still using off-the-shelf encryption, which is my rub. But
yep.
what are some new things around security? And I just have to ask you the question: are we secure yet? And then, if we are, then why is Microsoft not indemnifying us? So,
Right.
just curious your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, security goes hand in hand with trust, and I think that everything that we build has that in mind at the get-go, right? Internally when we talk about programs that we're working on, product enhancements or product releases, it's always about security and trust. And Microsoft's done a fine job accelerating the adoption of secure frameworks and building trust into every service. So like as an example, we have the zero trust framework. So instead of assuming everything behind the corporate firewall is safe, we say the zero trust model assumes breach and verifies every request as it originates through that open network. So regardless wherever that trust originate, or wherever that request originates, or what resources it accesses, zero trust teaches us to never trust, always verify.
That's right.
So every
Yeah, and
access
then I love
request
that about
fully
what you guys do. Yeah.
authenticated, authorized, all that good stuff. But the challenge begins. We start to build all these secure frameworks, security tools, security approaches, models, frameworks. It's all good, but then you lose sight of how you're going to crack that open, right? And that turns into an identity thing. So you talk about, I know
Yep.
Secured2 makes use of Windows Hello as an example. That's our first party identity authentication and
Which we
authorization
love it.
approach.
Yep.
So if you have a way to ensure that identities and devices and data and applications, infrastructure and network all have some sort of rich intelligence, and you're building analytics on top of that to detect and respond to anomalies real time, then you have the ability to react and respond. So that doesn't really answer the question, are we
No.
secure yet? Like, I
Yeah.
don't think we're ever going to be truly secure, because as much as I love the Secured2 product line, you still have the person's asset that they're accessing it. So you have to worry about malware or unauthorized gained access, or someone finding a way to, trick the iPhone's thumbprint, or any number of things. So there's all those things. But if you can build a rich contextual data system that is secure enough that even if someone's listening on the wire or on the fly, or they get access to your bits, that they have no way to compose this data in an intelligent manner, then you're set.
No, well, and I think that was why the marriage between Secured2 and Microsoft, in my mind, was so important, because you have the best locks on the front door you could ever get. I mean, I think Windows Hello and the facial recognition capability built right into the Windows experience is just, it's a no-brainer. And then when you marry that with this emerging technology that we've developed, which is that whole idea of, quantum safe security, or really what it shouldn't even be quantum safe security, but that is a huge problem it solves, is the quantum computing threat. But it's really the whole idea of the factorization of a key. We solve that problem, and that's
Right.
basically a fundamental issue with any encrypted system, as you know. And so I think when you put these two things together, it's really a 1 + 1 = wow, right? But I think you brought up a really interesting point, and this is a problem I want to solve with you guys, which is ultimately it comes down to, like with Secure2, we can protect your data from point of origination all the way into Azure or any one of the products of Office 365. And we can do that great. But the problem ultimately comes down to a person, right? You have to give access to somebody. And when you give somebody access, they have access, right? And so that's where the challenge always becomes, is because now if I give Joe access into Microsoft systems, we assume you're a really great guy and we can trust you. And so how is Microsoft handling how do I really know Joe is a good guy? And how do we watch Joe to maybe see if he's, siphoning our critical and secret information out once we've given him access to it? Because, computer systems today don't really know Joe is Joe.
Right.
Does that make sense? And I think that becomes now our view, and I'll just give you our view, and I want to hear your thoughts on this. But my view at Secured2 is this: ensure protection of all data, period, from anybody. So nobody's holding your data keys. Nobody's, you hold your keys and you're the only one that can unlock the data. Now we're shifting the risk down into that end user, which we can now monitor, because I can put a video camera. If I have a threat vector that no data can ever leave my company, I can literally put a camera on you and watch you, or I can use Citrix, or there's things I can do to monitor. But what's your take on that? Because, again, we're pushing the risk to that endpoint. How does Microsoft solve that endpoint problem?
Yeah, I mean, well, once someone's authenticated and authorized to use data, it doesn't stop there, right? So we
That's
have
right.
all sorts of great tools built into all of our products, or most of our products, for data exfiltration. So, an example might be, all of your personal work documents are shared in OneDrive, and then one day you start copying all of those files somewhere else. Well, we have a pretty good indicator of what that is, because we know you're accessing these data, and we can kind of surmise that some events are happening. So maybe there's an event where it looks like, based on you looking at job postings, or, I mean, I'm not saying that Big Brother is watching everything, but there's all sorts of different approaches that we can take to maybe make an assumption on if this is a good event or a bad event, and then take action, or let someone know.
Right.
And it just gets a little complicated, when you go from one system to the next. But I think that's the ever elusive dream, is this really a human individual with good intent, or do they have bad intent? And that turns into, an exercise of understanding what are the potential scenarios, and can you codify them? Can you
Yeah.
figure out a way to apply, AI and ML, and continue to teach that ML to discover these things, and then build it out?
Right, right. Well, I will say this: Microsoft has a technology that knows if I'm happy or not just by looking at me at a camera. I,
Yeah.
I, I saw that demo and it blew my
Oh yeah.
mind. I'm
Yeah,
like,
your age and all that good
oh,
stuff. And
it's
it always
unbelievable.
always has me like 2 years younger, which I'm just so
Yeah.
thrilled. And I just send them little love notes every now and then when I walk by it every day. I'm like, thank you.
Yeah. That's it though. Um, so we're gonna end on one last thing, and I think this is an interesting question, because I've never asked you this question, and I have always wanted to know kind of your thought on this. But with all this innovation and all this technology, where's it all going? I mean, if you had a crystal ball, What does our future look like in these platforms? And you know, I've always kind of envisioned eventually the technology just kind of melds away and it just becomes a part of you. And I think, you know, I'm seeing kind of this convergence of the human and technology, and maybe eventually the technology gets built into the humans. But you know, if you were to say, what does the future look like? Where is it all going?
Oh boy, that's a
I don't know. This is a good
a
question.
tricky one, right? You know, I mean, Microsoft's goal is to, empower the world, and I think that turns into how do we do that, right? How do we implement tools and processes and cultural changes, and what do we do to our technology to enable the citizen developer, if you will?
Right.
And if 5 years ago, if you would have told me that, my 14-year-old son would be able to build an app without writing any code, and this app could do, 5 or 6 really complicated things, get data, transform the data, present the data, allow input, that kind of thing, I would have said you're crazy. But we have all these really cool things, Power Apps, and on
Yeah.
the Azure side, Logic Apps. There's all these really neat approaches to enabling the citizen to do things.
Yeah.
More and more, IT is becoming the evil part of a company, and we're trying to enable businesses to do their thing. And so, until IT gets their stuff figured out and they understand what all the citizen developer stuff is and what all the cloud stuff is, and they help enable a business do their job, a lot of people do the end around. So the little shadow IT that happens, for the last 10 plus years, I'm sure has happened forever. That stuff is what I think is the good stuff in the future.
Right.
Can
Yeah,
can
I
we
agree.
enable people to do what they need to do in the least amount of work possible, and keeping it secure, keeping it standard, keeping it open, enabling that transparency and that privacy, and that stuff is really important. So, in the future, what does that look like? I don't know. Maybe developers don't need an IDE anymore. I don't know. It could be
Yeah.
any number of things. I just talked to my computer and told it, computer,
Here's
give
the
me
idea.
this,
Build it.
give me this thing, right?
Right.
I want to
Right.
do the John Luke Picard impression, but I'll completely mess that up. So I won't even go down the T thing. But yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's pretty interesting to see how we've progressed over the time. And I see cycles. There's some
Yeah.
that might call the cloud the next mainframe, right?
Right.
All of a
Right.
sudden we're
Yeah.
not writing code, we're just deploying stuff. I'm deploying my stuff to this thing and it runs it for me, like serverless and all that stuff. So
Right.
yeah,
Right. Yeah. It's going to be very interesting. One thing is certain, that no matter what happens in the future, Microsoft's going to have a major hand in whatever that is. And I just, you know, I think you work for one of the greatest companies in the world, and we've loved working with you guys. And I will say, in my journey with Microsoft, you, my friend, are one of my favorite things that's come out of it. And you know, I just really value you. And as this podcast shows, you really know your stuff. And so we really appreciate you taking the time today to do this. So thank
absolutely.
you
My
so
pleasure.
much. And we look forward to doing this again.
All right. Thanks, Darren.
All right. Have a
Take
great
care.
day. Yep.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.